thoughts like the clouds, whereas our higher, greater self is like the sun. All the negative thoughts, doubts, fears, anger, and resentments that we hold dim the light of the sun, and finally, the light comes through only weakly. It was Jesus Christ who said that we all, with faith, potentially have the power to heal. The saint or person of high consciousness is by definition one who has removed the clouds of negativity and radiates the full healing power of the sun. That is also why saintly beings have such magnetic power that they attract multitudes to their physical presence. As an example, when the late Indian saint Sri Ramana Maharshi had a birthday, 25,000 people stood in the sweltering tropical sun, shoulder to shoulder, in one solid mass to celebrate his presence and wish him well. As we consistently let go of resisting our fears and allow them to be surrendered, the energy that was tied up in the fear is relinquished and now becomes available to shine forth as the energy of love. Therefore, unconditional love has the greatest power of all, and that love is the power of the celebrated saints. Unconditional love is also the power of the mother and of the father, the presence of whom is so essential to the children's learning to love as they grow. It was Sigmund Freud who observed that the most fortunate thing that can happen to us growing up is to be our mother's favorite child. What about those of us who did not have the fortunate experience of being bathed in unconditional love as we grew up? There is the commonly held belief that if we did not have this experience, then we are somehow scarred or crippled for life. Actually, this is not so. A person who has experienced a great deal of love in early life has fewer fears and a head start, but this love is intrinsic within all of us. By the very nature of our being, and by the very nature of the life energy that flows through us and empowers us to breathe and to think, we all have that same vibrational energy level of love within us. If in looking at ourselves, we see that we have allowed the experience of our own nature to become blocked off by extensive fears, then we can rediscover the love within us by utilizing the mechanism of surrender, and thus letting go of the clouds of negativity. By rediscovering this inner love, we rediscover the true source of happiness. Owning the shadow. One of the blocks to emotional development is the fear of what lies buried in our unconscious. Carl Jung called this area, which we are unwilling to look at and to own, the shadow. He said that the self cannot become healed and whole unless we look at and acknowledge the shadow. This means that buried within us all, in what Jung called the collective unconscious, is everything that we most dislike admitting about ourselves. The average human, he said, would much rather project his shadow onto the world and condemn it and see it as evil, thinking that his problem is to battle with evil in the world. In actuality, the problem is merely to acknowledge the presence of such thoughts and impulses in ourselves. By acknowledging them, they become quiet. Once they are quiet, they no longer unconsciously run us. In looking at our fears of the unknown, which are really fears of what is in the depths of the unconscious, it is useful to have a sense of humor. Once looked at and acknowledged, the shadow no longer has any power. In fact, it is only our fear of these thoughts and impulses that give them any power. Once we become acquainted with our shadow, we no longer have to project our fears upon the world, and they begin to evaporate rapidly. What makes the endless television programs, which are concerned with mayhem in its various forms, so attractive? It is because what is being acted out on the screen, where it is safe, are all the forbidden unconscious fantasies in our own psyche. Once we are willing to look at the same movies on the TV screen of our own minds and see whence they really originate, the attraction of such entertainment disappears. People who have acknowledged the content of their own shadow have no interest in crime, violence, and fearful disasters. One of the blocks to becoming acquainted with the fears in one's own mind is the fear of the opinions of others. The wanting of their approval goes on inside of our minds in a constant fantasy. We identify with the opinions of others, including authority figures, and coalesce this in such a way that we hear it as our own opinion of ourselves. In looking at fears, then, it is well to remember that Carl Jung saw this reservoir of the forbidden inside the shadow as a part of the collective unconscious. The term collective unconscious means that everybody has these thoughts and fantasies. There is nothing unique about any of us when it comes to the way we symbolize our emotions. Everybody secretly harbors the fear that they are dumb, ugly, unlovable, and a failure. The unconscious mind is not polite. It thinks in gross concepts. When it thinks of the phrase, "murder the bum," the unconscious literally means that. Look deep within yourself the next time somebody cuts you off in traffic, and picture what you would really do to that person if you were strictly honest with yourself and did not censor the image coming to mind. You'd like to run them off the road, wouldn't you? Pulverize them. Push them off the cliff. Isn't that right? That's the way the unconscious thinks. The reason that a sense of humor is useful is because these images are comical once we look at them. There is nothing awful about it. It is just the way the unconscious handles images. It doesn't mean that you are a rotten person or that you are potentially a criminal. It just means that you have gotten honest and faced how the human-animal mind operates in this dimension. There is no point in getting melodramatic, self-critical, or tragic about it. The unconscious is crude and uncivilized. While your intellect went to prep school, your unconscious remained in the jungle, where it is still swinging in the trees. Looking at the shadow side is not a time to get prissy or squeamish. It's not a time to take it literally either, because the symbols of the unconscious are just that. They are symbols, and they are primitive in nature. If worked with consciously, they can empower us rather than inhibit us. It takes a lot of energy to keep the shadow buried and to suppress our multitude of fears. The result is energy depletion. On the emotional level, it is expressed as an inhibition of the capacity to love. In the world of consciousness, like goes to like, so that fear attracts fear, just as its corollary is true that love attracts love. The more fear we hold, the more fearful situations we attract to our life. Each fear requires additional energy to create a protective device until finally all of our energy is drained into our extensive defensive measures. The willingness to look at a fear and work with it until we are free of it brings about immediate rewards. Each of us has within us a certain reservoir of suppressed and repressed fear. This quantity of fear spills into all areas of our life, colors all of our experience, decreases our joy in life, and reflects itself in the musculature of the face so as to affect our physical appearance, our physical strength, and the condition of health in all of the organs in the body. Sustained and chronic fear gradually suppresses the body's immune system. With kinesiologic testing, we can instantly demonstrate that a fearful thought causes a major reduction in muscle power and deranges the energy flow down the body's energy meridians to the body's vital organs. Although we know that it is totally damaging to our relationships, health, and happiness, we still hang on to fear. Why is that? We have the unconscious fantasy that fear is keeping us alive. This is because fear is associated with our whole set of survival mechanisms. We have the idea that if we were to let go of fear, our main defense mechanism, we would become vulnerable in some way. In reality, the truth is just the opposite. Fear is what blinds us to the real dangers of life. In fact, fear itself is the greatest danger that the human body faces. It is fear and guilt that bring about disease and failure in every area of our lives. We could take the same protective actions out of love rather than out of fear. Can we not care for our bodies because we appreciate and value them rather than out of fear of disease and dying? Can we not be of service to others in our life out of love, rather than out of fear of losing them? Can we not be polite and courteous to strangers because we care for our fellow human beings, rather than because we fear losing their good opinion of us? Can we not do a good job because we care about the quality of our performance and we care about our fellow workers? Can we not perform our job well because we care about the recipients of our services, rather than just the fear of losing our jobs or pursuing our own ambition? Can we not accomplish more by cooperation rather than by fearful competition? Can we not drive carefully because we have a high regard for ourselves and care for our welfare and those who love us, rather than because we fear an accident? On a spiritual level, isn't it more effective if, out of compassion and identification with our fellow human beings, we care for them rather than trying to love them out of fear of God's punishment if we don't? Guilt. One particular form of fear is what we call guilt. Guilt is always associated with a feeling of wrongness and potential punishment, either real or in fantasy. If punishment is not forthcoming in the external world, it expresses itself as self-punishment on an emotional level. Guilt accompanies all of the negative emotions, and thus, where there is fear, there is guilt. If you think a guilty thought and have somebody test your muscle strength, you will see that the muscle instantly goes weak. Your cerebral hemisphere has become desynchronized, and all of your energy meridians are thrown out of balance. Nature, therefore, says that guilt is destructive. If guilt is so destructive, then why are there such paeans of praise allotted to it? Why do so-called experts view guilt as beneficial? For example, a psychiatrist wrote a magazine article in praise of guilt, declaring, "Guilt is good for you." He then qualified the statement with appropriate guilt. Let's look at what guilt is really all about and see if we agree or not. When you cross the street, you look both ways to see if a car is coming. How did this come about? When you were a child, you were told that it was bad to cross the street. Thus, we see that guilt is really a substitute for a sense of reality in a mind that is undeveloped, such as that of a child. It is a learned behavior which is purportedly pragmatic, to prevent further error or the repetition of a mistake. 99% of guilt has nothing whatsoever to do with reality. In fact, the most pious, meek, and harmless individuals are often riddled with guilt. Guilt is really self-condemnation and self-invalidation of our worth and value as a human being. Guilt is as prevalent as fear, and we feel guilty no matter what we are doing. A part of our mind says that we really ought to be doing something else, or whatever we are actually doing at the moment, we ought to be doing better. We should be getting a better golf score. We should be reading a book instead of watching television. We should make love better, cook better, run faster, grow taller, be stronger, be smarter, be more educated. In between the fear of living and the fear of dying is the guilt of the moment. We seek to escape it by remaining unaware of it through suppression, repression, projecting it onto others, and escapism. Remaining unconscious of guilt, repression, however, does not solve it. The guilt reemerges in the form of self-punishment, and through accidents, misfortune, loss of jobs and relationships, physical disease and sickness, tiredness, exhaustion, and the multiple ways the ingenious mind figures out how to bring about the loss of pleasure, joy, and aliveness. Guilt represents death just as love represents life. Guilt is part of the smaller self and underlies our willingness to believe negative things about ourselves. The happiness and joy of the day is instantly destroyed by one negative remark from a family member, friend, or neighbor. Physical disease is unlikely to exist without guilt, and guilt is a denial of our inner intrinsic innocence. Why do we buy into so much garbage? Is it not because of our very innocence? Is it not because, as we grew up, we trusted that what others were telling us was the truth? And even currently, do we still trust what others are telling us is the truth? Is it not so that we have bought into 10,000 lies and are willing to buy another 10,000 out of the naivete of our inner innocence? Is not that inner innocence the very reason for our exploitability? In fact, when we look deep within ourselves, is it not because of our very innocence that we believe ourselves to be guilty? It is because of our own inner innocence that we have bought into all the negativity of the world and allowed it to kill our aliveness, destroy our awareness of who we really are, and sell us the pathetic little smallness for which we have settled. Is not ours the innocence of the newborn that cannot defend itself and, with no capacity for discernment, could only allow itself to be programmed like a computer? To see this means to become conscious. We hear of consciousness-raising programs and weekend seminars to expand our consciousness. What does this mean? To get some new complicated formulas? To get programmed with somebody else's idea of mystical truth? Most of the consciousness programs boil down to this essential point. Become aware of what we are buying into, what we are accepting daily. Let's look at what we have already been programmed with and begin to question it, disassemble it, and let it go. Let's wake up and free ourselves from being exploited and enslaved by the negative programming of the world. We will see it for what it is, which is an attempt by others to control us, exploit us, extract our money, our services, our energy, our loyalties, and capture our mind. The mechanisms whereby this comes about were so beautifully exemplified in the movie Tron, in which the very function of master control was to enslave by progressive programming. When we see the truth of how programming happens, we will see that we are the pure, blank computer. We are the innocent space in which the programming is occurring. When we look at all of this, we are going to get angry. Anger is better than resignation, apathy, depression, and grief. It means to take charge of our mind instead of handing it to the television set, the newspaper, the magazines, the neighbors, the conversations in the subway, the chance remarks of the waitress, the garbage in and the garbage out. What went into our memory banks was garbage. And when we see this, we will have much less fear. We will enjoy starting to let the feelings come up, seeing them for what they are, clearing out all of the garbage and letting it all go. Once we have looked deep within ourselves and found that innate inner innocence, we will stop hating ourselves. We will stop condemning ourselves and stop buying into the condemnation of others and their subtle attempts to invalidate our worth as human beings. It's time